Hey everybody, how's it going? It is Fabrizio Aiello. Welcome to What is Fabrizio Inking? And today I am inking Horace H. Hoover. So this is a drawing I had started a week or so ago. So I'm going to continue on this. This is Horace H. Hoover. It's a comic book that I write, draw, ink, color, letter, published by Alterna Comics. Issues 1 and 2 are currently out, available for purchase. It's like a 1920s, 30s occult detective. A little quirky, a little fun, a little mystery adventure type thing. Check it out. Alrighty, so we have Horace here, and he's kind of being attacked by a vampire who is sort of forming from the mist, we'll say. Not too far along on this inking, so a lot of basic stuff left to do. I've been using the same brush for a while now. It depends what kind of, like, the quality can vary. Even if it's an expensive brush, for me, sometimes the brush right out of the tube, we'll say, doesn't work great. I give it a fair amount of use before I completely give up on the brush. But this one in particular, I've been using this for a while. It really seems to like hold its shape. And I need my glove. 1 second. Sorry about that. So yeah, I use this glove. Essentially, it allows your hand to glide on the paper quite a bit more, so that way it doesn't catch whenever you're trying to do like a nice stroke with the brush. If it catches, essentially it'll like jitter, and it'll be really obvious. So that's what I use that for. So at this stage, I hate to use the word outlining, but for the most part I'm trying just to get the, like, rough in the shapes, get the outline of some of these characters, to make sure that the drawing is okay to move forward, because sometimes, as painful as it is, you don't realize a part of the drawing isn't working until you start like actually inking. So this just gives us a little more structure and a little more confidence that, okay, all the proportions are working, the composition's working. And then you can go in and spot the blacks and add the grays, any midtones. And then from there, if it's still working, which hopefully it is, then you can go in and kind of put all that fine detail in, which I'm kind of noodling right now, but that's okay. There's nobody in chat yet. It must be football or a shopping day, which I get. I have not done any shopping. So for the backgrounds, you really want to, you want to make sure the silhouette's interesting. You want to have some interesting like details that your eye can kind of enjoy. But you don't want to go too crazy with that background image because that can very much compete with these two figures. So you really want that to recede. And you do that a few different ways. Again, one is the amount of detail that you're adding. Because the further back something is in space, you have atmospheric perspective, you're just not going to see those details. The other is line weight. It's also essentially part of atmospheric perspective. So you really want the eye to go to your main characters, and then after the user, the reader, has kind of gone over that a while, then maybe they go back into the background, and if there's little details that they can pick out, that's great, but you definitely want to make sure that the amount of blacks and the detail really stay with the main characters. One second. I actually started working on a new sculpture. So after I finished the Horace H. Hoover Mini, and that is an STL that is posted for download. It's also being manufactured by a company. I want to make sure that I have Horace, Max, and Slurp at least. So I started working on a Max sculpture, which I'm very much liking, because it's always about the pose. The pose is 99% of the character, and when I show you the Max pose, it encompasses everything about the character. Maybe not everything, but there might be a little bit of hyperbole, but the same way the Horace does. So Horace sort of has his back arched with his hands, sort of fists on his hips. It's kind of the classic Superman pose, but it's Horace, so it doesn't have the same feeling. But it's 100% his character. So I do my sculpting in ZBrush. I've been using ZBrush for many years. I don't know how long ZBrush has been around, but I've been using it for probably, 17 years, something like that. Using some of the very first versions of the software. One of the interesting things about inking your own work is it gives you an opportunity to fix things that you might have messed up or things you might have missed. But it also can get extraordinarily frustrating because of things you messed up or things you missed. They become very obvious in the inking phase, and then you're kind of mad at your penciler self for not catching it, because it just makes the inking a little more harder than it needs to be. So the edge of his cloak, it's not a cape. I want to make sure it's not too straight, because again, I want it to look like he's forming from the mist or emerging from the mist. So I definitely want to, I don't have like a really fine straight edge on the end everywhere. Essentially I want to mimic some of the line work of the mist, which I'm off camera. Hey Spicer McLeroy, how's it going? Yeah, it's been tough this past month with like the holidays and everything. I did catch some of it, but I wasn't able to join. The work is piling up, we'll say. But excited over Christmas vacation, we'll say, is to get back into really cranking out some Horace H. Hoover pages for the book. It does suck because I'm a big fan of like holiday themed sketch cards and character variations. Like last year I did a Horace H. Hoover Christmas Carol. And I did a series of 9 cards, and that was a lot of fun. I didn't get a chance to do that this year. Yeah, me too, gonna grind this holiday vacation on comic. Oh, cool. I wasn't aware that you have a book. Maybe things get lost in Twitter. I don't know if you've posted it or anything. I'd love to check it out. If you're ready. No pressure. How long do you usually take to make an issue? So it's been a little interesting because I've modified things a little bit between issues. So for example, like issue 1 for me really was just getting on my feet, to do the whole process, writing, drawing, inking, coloring, and lettering. And then issue 2, I'm like, okay, I can experiment a little bit, and I did a really big 2-page spread, which took a long time. And then, in issue 3, I wanted to experiment a little bit with numbers of panels on a page. So I have a 12 panel page and a 10 panel page, and I wanted to see if I could make that work. So it's a little hard for me to judge because I keep experimenting with different things, and those different things kind of take a little longer. I think if I was just executing very similar to issue 1, 3 months I think is a pretty good timetable, but each issue, I just get a bug to really work on a particular thing. And then, if you can't experiment in your own book, then, what can you do? So if I really feel the need to play around with some storytelling techniques, then that's what I'm going to do. But because of that, I would say issues, 3 and even issue 4, it's taking longer. Maybe even 4 to 5 months. I'm hoping that at a certain point, essentially you just get faster. So once you get to experiment with a fair amount of things, the things that are those initial landmarks or milestones for you. But once you feel like you've achieved them, then you can just refine them on the margins instead of completely abandoning a particular process or approach and doing something else. And I feel like that's where I'm at. And by the time I hit issue 5, I'll just be sort of, again, executing on things that I've been able to study and to refine over the past 4 issues. Not ready for release just yet. We are pouring over the page to an obscene amount to make sure it's as good as it can be. That's the way to do it, I'll be honest. No, thanks. Yeah, I will say, out of all the skills, that I need for the book, inking is probably, and penciling, I'm definitely the most comfortable with that. When it comes to coloring and lettering and other things, it takes a little more effort for me. But I've been inking with a brush for, I don't even know how long. Very, very, very long time. But as far as really trying to pour over the pages, I was mentioning for issue 4, my thumbnails. I think I did it on the last video, maybe. I was showing my thumbnails, and I did 5 versions of thumbnail for the entire book, which I've never done that. I think I've only ever done maybe 3 tops. But yeah, it's sort of the resolution of the Smokeman stuff, and I really wanted to, sorry, to make sure I'm on camera here. I really wanted to make sure everything read correctly. There's a big fight scene. So yeah, I did 5 thumbnail variations, which is kind of crazy. It's almost it's pretty difficult to keep track of. But it's better to have 5 versions of a page layout to pull from than 1 or 2. I would like to see somebody else inking my work one of these days. maybe after issue 5, I'll do some pinups and post like high-res versions of the drawings if anybody else wants to take a stab at it. It's hard to imagine somebody else inking them though, but it would be really fun to see. Yeah, directors have multiple takes to get a shot right. 4 takes, 10 takes. Yeah, 43 to get it right. Had to remind myself of that a few times during the book. Yeah, I think David Fincher's sort of famous for that. Peter Jackson, they just take after take after take. And I'm sure in the moment, like the actors are just like, what the hell is going on? But you can't deny the final product. So sometimes it might seem like torture along the way, but I mean, I can't imagine that being a detriment outside of a budget, but we don't have to worry about that for comics. It's funny because there are times when I'm inking things, I don't want to say I change my style, but depending on what I'm inking, sometimes I'm like mentally thinking about different inkers. Maybe it's Al Milgrom, like his like Daredevil stuff, or Dan Green's X-Men stuff, or etc. Klaus Janson. So I kind of remind myself, I'm like, yeah, just loosen up, ink more like Klaus or something for this particular texture, or this scene, or this character or something. I don't know if it works well, but I at least try to remind myself. Yeah, so these like gravestones in the back, they're really far in the back, and I want to make sure that they don't pop forward. So can I try to make really thin lines, not a lot of detail, and definitely break up the lines as much as I can. Now, to be honest, a lot of times, like a micron or something else would actually be better for these really thin lines, but I guess that's where my laziness comes into play. I guess I don't want to switch tools all the time. So I needed a thesaurus to read your issues. Artwork is fantastic. Colors, inks, composition. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I wanted to do something a little different with his dialogue, and it felt natural for him. And I thought people would appreciate that, because it's pretty different. You usually don't run into characters like that. And the thing I like about Horus, hopefully that people kind of get, is that it's not in a pretentious way. Like, Horus isn't trying to like come off as a snooty person. It's just how he talks, But I can see other characters that could come off as really pretentious and like off-putting. definitely didn't want that to happen now. I feel like Horace is a person that you would like in real life. Sort of positive and optimistic, maybe a little like flighty, in a like a genius kind of way, like can't see the forest through the trees sometimes because they're thinking about something else. Ever think of having a dictionary in the book somewhere so we can stay in the world? That's an interesting idea. I really like that idea. Thank you. I think I know what to do with that too. Thank you. That's a great idea. Yeah, it didn't feel pretentious at all. Is his arch enemy someone that uses those words pretentiously? Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, like a dictionary. I don't know if you're familiar with something called the Devil's Dictionary. It's like a satirical work by Ambrose Bierce, where he essentially comes up with his own definitions for words. So I wouldn't do something like that, but maybe something similar. Yeah, that's a great idea. I got to think about that some more. Thank you. Yeah, I am a firm believer that lots of people have great ideas, and to think that, just because you're the writer or whatever, that somebody's not going to have a good idea it's crazy to me. I posted on Twitter, I don't know, a week or so ago, and I just wanted to hear people's ideas on what they thought about Horace's helmet. Is it a helmet? Is it his head? What are his powers? Because you don't have control over what people imagine. Now, you could be like really ham-fisted and just essentially tell the readers everything, but I can't stand that as a reader, so I really tried to avoid that. So it was fun though, listening to people's interpretations. Some people were not close, but not too far off, which means I think I was being not too ham-fisted, but not too subtle where they don't get anything. The ongoing series is where all of that stuff is going to kind of really be laid out. Like the first issue for the ongoing, I wanted to be kind of I don't want to say typical, but kind of typical, yeah. A lot of those questions are answered at the beginning. New things pop up, but hopefully by then people have read the miniseries and they're interested to see, horse's origins and his powers and all that kind of stuff. But in the same vein, even if you've never read any Horace H. Hoover at all, you can kind of get up to speed on that, and then hopefully go back and read the miniseries. So I'm still in the outlining phase for the most part, even though I did a little bit of texturing. But for the most part, I'm still trying to get the silhouette and the outline of the shapes that I need before I spot blacks and start really texturing. The curve of the hose usually creates a D silhouette. Was that intentional? It's something I realized pretty quickly is the hose has to be stylized. I thought at first, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna accurately every time do like an accurate perspective of the hose, but it would create some weird shapes sometimes and silhouettes that just they didn't work with the rest of the composition or just the scene in general. So it is stylized depending on what's going on and where I need the hose to go. As far as like the letter D, I never really thought about it. I wasn't thinking about that. I was just thinking about the shape in any given position, really. Because there are times where, as much as I love his helmet, it can get difficult. There are times where I see old school superheroes, and I envy the silhouette and their costumes. But hopefully it's worth it, just because it, especially with the coloring, you get that big shape of red, which is kind of hard to ignore. I haven't done a sort of traditional haunted house story just yet. It's one of those things, like, I just feel has to be done at some point in time. I like the idea of just taking sort of tropes and the classics and just throw in Horace H. Hoover in that scenario, you automatically get a different story. Sorry, I keep going off camera. I'm not sure what's... I think there's a delay that's really kind of messing me up. Sometimes I do wonder what if I could go back in time and shown like the character design for Horace H. Hoover, what like the greats would think of it. Like if John Buscema saw this, he'd be like, "What the heck?" Or not, maybe. I always wonder about that though. Yeah, this one's going to take at least another 2 hours, maybe even 3 hours. This one's going to be, it's going to be some time. One thing I noticed about architecture from sort of the old comics that I used to love, because I'll go back and I'll kind of analyze them in a more of like an academic kind of way, because we all hold ourselves to like certain standards whenever we're making things, but sometimes those standards, they're not real, in that what we imagined was the case isn't the case. Like if you go back and you look at a lot of architecture in comic books, I mean, it is far from perfect. You know, the perspective is it's pretty good, slightly off. You know, things are windows aren't evenly spaced across a building. You know, the lines aren't straight. None of that. So sometimes I think it's important to actually double check that what you imagined was the case is actually the case, because you could be holding yourself to some standard that doesn't even exist in whatever field that you happen to be working in. And then you have to say to yourself, okay, well, when John Buscema did an interior and he really didn't spend a bunch of time worrying about perspective and things like that, and it works, it's solid, it's nothing too crazy that takes you out of the story, that should be the standard that you're trying to hit, instead of this imagined standard that you set for yourself. And then, of course, sometimes you go back and things are as good as you imagined. When I look at Bernie Wrightson stuff, or Gene Colan, or Frank Miller, there's a bunch where I'm like, you know what, that actually holds up in every sense. Because can you imagine for a second talking to somebody and saying, oh, I got this comic book. I'll just use The Dark Knight or Year One as an example. I read Year One. It just came out last week. How was it? It was okay, but the floor, the hardwood floor spacing wasn't perfect. Because that's just imagine how silly that would be. So I think about that often. I'm not saying don't try, but really prioritize what's important and kind of go from there. So there's a few questions that I haven't really answered in my head yet just for this drawing. One is the sky. I had penciled in these horizontal lines because I don't think I want to leave it without any texture at all. But it's tricky. It's tricky because sometimes you leave things thinking, oh, well, the coloring will get it. I'll be able to differentiate via that. Then you don't have a finished black and white drawing, which that's okay. It doesn't always have to be the case, but sometimes having a black and white drawing that works on its own is nice. So those are definitely questions you need to answer, you know, as you get further along, because then you need to know whether or not you need to darken things up, put textures, hold back on the textures depending on what's going on. Getting closer though. It's funny because, you know, I was collecting comics in the 90s. I mean, I was collecting comics before the 90s, but the 90s came around and you have the Image, and it is unavoidable, the whole feet issue. People talk about it still to this day. And the thing about feet is it's got to be the least important, least interesting part of a drawing. Unless somebody's kicking somebody in the face or something like that, it really, you know, feet are just... They're always going to be at the bottom somewhere. There's nothing going on here. So it's always funny to me when people complain about feet. I'm like, yeah, you don't really care about feet. But when you're obscuring feet artificially, I think that's the kicker. So, I mean, I guess I could have put stuff down here to cover his feet up, but to be honest, I like having sort of this, I'll call it dead area for all intents and purposes. That way, if I need to crop it, that I'm not doing anything bad, getting rid of somebody's feet, cropping up the knees or something like that. If you can get the head, hands, and feet correct, they'll forgive you for the rest. Yeah. I think that is absolutely true. It was funny, for a short time, I remember seeing, this was a while ago, I guess, Jim Lee doing Batman stuff, and I swear in every Batman shot I saw of him, it was Batman like feet first, with his like combat boot type things. I'm like, I wonder if that's his you know, response to the years of having to answer it about feet. That being said, I draw horses' feet a lot. Thanks, Spicer. Yeah. It's, I only have a few more minutes left here, so I'll kind of take a look at it. Actually, you know what? I have the original drawings. I was going to show this. Might as well do it now. Yeah, so we have some outlining for the background. Most of Horus we have kind of outlined, so I can really kind of get into the more specifics, spot and blacks and whatnot. I did do a little texture in here just because it was fun, and sometimes you have to have something fun to get you through. But yeah, let me grab let me grab the original drawing and then the variations. That might be kind of interesting. So this was the original drawing I did. You can tell, like, well, first off, I changed his hand because this was me not being, it was kind of a, I don't want to say, it was an uninteresting hand. And his forearm, the foreshadowing wasn't working. So I'm like, you know what, I'm going to redo this hand and kind of tilt it forward so we get that sort of classic hand here. So this is sort of like a doll hand. His hand's a little too big too here. And we have this little more energetic here. One of the other things I had to do was this hand here. I liked this, but it was just awkward. As much as I like the idea of two fists, I'm like, you know what? I like the idea of his one hand coming up and then the other one about to punch him. This looks much more natural, I think. This looks, I hate to use the word comic booky, but oh, and also his hand is turned the wrong way. Like, it's facing you and it shouldn't be. So I had to do a profile because that's accurate and the other one really wasn't. Yeah, so there's no background, there's no nothing. I just had this idea. I kind of implied mist or something down here, but very poorly. So then I pulled it out of storage and kind of I expanded it and tweaked it, and then this is what we got. Yeah, good choice on the open hand. Frazetta did hands best. Oh, Frazetta, good lord. I wish he did more comics. truly one of the greats. Yeah, so thanks everybody for watching. I appreciate it. I will be doing this, and I still have a Hawkman drawing that I've been inking, so between the two, I'll probably switch back and forth this week depending on Christmas or whatever. But yeah, thanks a lot everybody. I appreciate it. Again, if you haven't checked out Horace H. Hoover, go to alternacomics.com and check it out. It's like an occult mystery, and hopefully the other issues come out over the next year, and we'll wrap up this miniseries and start the ongoing. Thanks again everybody. I appreciate it. Have a good evening.